How are you? One is a very traditional crisis, which is we'll call it power transition. It is the rise of China and the relative decline of the United States or of the American coalition. It's still a big coalition. It's still the most powerful coalition on earth. But we have a world where the old order that emerged out of the Cold War has to make room for China and a world where there'll be more than one superpower. And it will be competitive. It will have conflict, but it will be a world that we have to kind of build supports and guardrails around. So that's a crisis of power transition that's unfolding. It's slowing down in some sense because China is looking like it's not as formidable economically as we thought it would be. The transition is going to be slower, and it may not even be a transition. It may simply be a kind of world where we have a couple different power centers. The second crisis is really more of a crisis of modernity, a crisis of the planet Earth. Global warming, it's a crisis of pandemics, it's a crisis of revolutionary technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning and bioengineering that are in some sense forcing all of us, east, west, north, and south, to develop new ways of operating, to find the good parts of the revolution and guard against the bad parts. And the bad parts are environmental primarily. And then the third crisis is the crisis of liberal democracy, including in America. And this is really the erosion of a kind of moderate center at the heart of Western democracies, the rise of polarization, inequality, migration, politics, rise of populist nationalism, all of this that is making it harder for the old democracies that have been kind of at the center of the global system to remain stable and internationalist. And if the United States is not stable and is not internationalist, the whole system vibrates because it's woven, the United States is so deeply into the fabric of this global system that when the anchor state starts to vibrate, the whole system starts to vibrate. I do think we are at a moment where there are questions about whether inside of liberal democracies and across the wider liberal order, whether these countries and the system they built can deliver on these basic life opportunities, economic growth, enough equality to make the system fair and legitimate, solve problems. The liberal order has solved a tremendous number of problems, rebuilding Europe, creating a partnership between France and Germany to launch the European project, incorporating fascist Germany and imperial Japan into a post-war liberal order, creating institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, even the United Nations, but also the WHO and functional organizations to manage economic security and political and environmental interdependence, creating frameworks so that countries like Korea over the last 25, 30 years has been able to trade, advance, grow, and transition from military dictatorship to democracy. So having a framework for countries to individually solve problems and transition, and globally to work together, there's a huge track record of success there. In world history terms, the most successful period of global history has been since 1945, measured in terms of economic growth, creating physical security, and creating a kind of glimmering of social justice through human rights. All of this has been a golden age, despite all these problems we've been talking about. Now the question is the future and what what is it delivering today? It has a glorious past, but does it have a viable future? And I think that's the big question that we're all debating. A headline in a newspaper recently, quoting the American Senator Bernie Sanders, is saying, if Trump is elected, that will be the end of democracy. And there is an argument there that is very important, that this is not just a usual right-wing candidate. This is someone who intends to use the powers of the presidency to destroy what he calls the deep state, which is really the American government and the accumulation of commitments and investments that the U.S. has made to build an open, liberal society. This is not even to speak of the international dangers that Trump poses. He said he would withdraw from NATO. He certainly is skeptical of the alliances in Asia with Japan and Korea. He has nothing to say that's good about multilateral cooperation, the WTO, which he withdrew from, global climate change, which he withdrew from the Paris Accords, disinterest in arms control. Almost in every dimension, Trump has shown an antagonism towards anything internationalist. America first, at the end of the day, really a slogan that could be described as America alone. It's really a recipe for Trump to hang out with his autocratic buddies like Putin. So I think this is a real danger. And if we can get past Trump and escort him off the stage of history, all the problems of America will not be solved. But I do think a singular and quite unusually effective demagogue will be eliminated from the American system, and we will debate. We will have a left. We will have a right. But the Constitution and the America that we've known can remain in business. But we are really at a moment where until we settle this, we won't know for sure. It's extraordinarily complicated, and there are no easy or even good pathways forward. If you step back from an American perspective, what you see is a region that is packed with dangers of escalation and further violence. You see problems that have been festering for decades. That the underlying sources of this violence is deeply rooted in territory, ethnicity, religion, antagonisms that are old, unresolved. There is, from an American view, if you take American presidents as a whole over the decades, there needs to be both security for Israel and justice for the Palestinian people. And that means their own political independent state. A two-state solution is what we call it. And there won't be an end to violence until you get a territorial settlement and a kind of dual sovereignty system that allows the Palestinians to have their rights secured, and in that two systems arrangement, a security regime that will allow Israel to have what it deserves as well, which is security and a stable system on their side of the borders. These long-term solutions are going to be hard to attain, but the current war with Hamas has made it clear that you can't just patch it up. You can't just hope for a ceasefire and everybody will go back to their ordinary lives. This is not going to go away until a more structural kind of regional settlement is in place, and this will have to entail involvement of the Arab states, starting with Saudi Arabia. Again, the problems are one can imagine that solution, that kind of regional settlement, but the individual governments involved are just not in a place where they can make, starting with Israel, those heroic decisions. They're just so divided. There are so many extremist elements that are lurking across the system, the region, that it is hard to imagine the pursuit of long-term self-interest, or enlightened self-interest that would get you to that regional settlement. But that's where we have to go. And the U.S., distracted, as you've suggested, by Ukraine and by the long-term and perhaps more profound challenge of China, to nonetheless use its good offices to push and pull the region in that direction.